this man became a cannibal ghoul due to an accident. From that moment on, he faced the overwhelming temptation of hunger. Despite this, Ken still adhered to the boundaries of humanity. He tried to control himself, refusing to eat any human flesh, even if it meant starving to death. However, when Tuka forcibly shoved a piece of meat into Ken's mouth, he couldn't resist the tempting taste. The moment Ken tasted the meat, he decided in his heart that it was exceptionally delicious. Even so, Ken still felt extreme disgust towards the inhuman version of himself. He firmly believed he was not a monster like Tuka. After being called a monster by Ken, Tuka angrily launched a series of attacks on him. Ken thought that, although he had become a ghoul, he still didn't want to fall to their level. Tuka, after being ridiculed as a monster by Ken, felt helpless, because she was born a ghoul. She had never experienced the taste of cake, and she would spend her life running from human pursuit. At that moment, the manager of the safe zone appeared, stopping their quarrel. It turned out that the cafe Ken frequently visited was actually a sanctuary for ghouls. Everyone took care of each other, including looking after weaker ghouls. Ken took a sip of coffee, and he was surprised to find that it tasted far better than any other food. It even helped him relax for a moment. Though ghouls could enjoy coffee, it wasn't enough to sustain their lives. The manager handed Ken a package, and Ken immediately recognized that it contained human flesh. The reason the manager was helping Ken was because he knew Ken had undergone an organ transplant of a powerful ghoul, Rise. This made Ken neither fully human nor completely ghoul. In this world, only the safe zone could accommodate Ken. After returning to his room, Ken continued his battle against hunger. Ken felt like he saw Rise, who seemed to be coaxing him into eating the food. On the verge of losing his sanity, Ken only snapped back to reality when he heard the phone ring. In the end, he threw the food aside, barely avoiding another fall into depravity. The next day, Ken returned to school. When he saw his classmates eating normal food, he suddenly felt a strong sense of disorientation. Hideyoshi had not been able to contact Ken for a long time and was very worried. When Hideyoshi saw Ken, he seemed to sense something was wrong. The two went to see their senior, Nishiki, for study materials. However, when they arrived at Nishiki's house, they were shocked to find that Nishiki was the ghoul who had almost killed Ken the previous day. Nishiki threatened them, and the two had to pretend they hadn't seen him. Nishiki made plans to meet Hideyoshi at his house that evening, but Ken couldn't stop thinking about how violent Nishiki had been the night before. He decided to go with Hideyoshi to Nishiki's house that night. After school, Nishiki acted like a normal person, buying them taiyaki. Ken looked at the human food and felt disgusted. However, what he didn't expect was that, as a ghoul, Nishiki ate it directly. Had Ken not witnessed Nishiki's violence the night before, he wouldn't have suspected Hideyoshi of being a cannibal monster. As the three walked through a narrow alley, Hideyoshi was suddenly knocked down by a trap set by Nishiki. Now, without Tuka's interference, Nishiki was ready to deal with Ken himself. After all, this school was his territory, and Ken had repeatedly trespassed. He would never let Ken off the hook. Plus, Nishiki mistakenly thought Ken intended to eat Hideyoshi. Ken immediately declared that he was different from Nishiki, and Hideyoshi was his friend. Hearing this, Nishiki angrily lunged at Ken, and forcefully stabbed him through the heart. Ken's body became fragile in front of him, easily torn apart like tofu.